Hi, how's everybody doing? There's more than 10 times more of you than I was expecting when I was not prepared. I think this is probably I prepared, but I wasn't ready for, I was sitting up here in the last talk trying to remember. I'm pretty sure that this is the first time I've been up on a stage since before the pandemic, and I'm more nervous than I'm used to, honestly. I don't usually feel that way. So anyway, thanks for coming. Why are you all interested in teaching SRE? I really thought 12 people would show up if I was lucky. All right, it's too big an audience. I can't do interactive call and response. All right, well, we'll give it a shot. I'm Mikey. Here's how I got here. I have a degree in math. That's the only degree I've got from a place called Pomona College, which you're going to hear a little bit more about. I was a UNIX system administrator at Pomona College from 2002 to 2006. Most talks I have done, that's not super relevant background, but today it is. I was a SRE, and then I was a site reliability manager, some such, at Google from 2006 to 2014. Most of you that I know here, that's how I know you. And then I was administrator of something called the U.S. Digital Service, which is that I worked for the U.S. government from 2014 to 2017. I see Mark is here. Oh, you guys are all USDS. Well, God bless you. So they're still out there, I suppose, doing their stuff. Since 2017, we're skipping a couple of details that I don't like to talk about very much, but the only thing that I've done for money since 2017 is intermittent consulting with a partnership of 4 people that is, 3 of which have Google SRE backgrounds, so you may know it's, my company's called Aleph, pronounced sort of like olive, and it's myself, it's Matt Weaver, who used to run parts of Search SRE at Google, Carla Geiser, who used to run parts of Storage SRE at Google, and Marina Nitza, who formerly was Marina Martin and was the CTO at the Department of Veterans Affairs, but did not work at Google. So that's what I do since then. What we try to do with our company is interventions that are short-term and intensive, and we kind of trying to figure out what that discipline is exactly and what it's called. This class has been a good kind of workshop for me to work out those ideas a little bit. If you know me for that triangle over there is a thing I made up and drew on a whiteboard one day in the healthcare.gov disaster mess, and it got written down, and then some of the fine people that wrote your SRE books put it into books, so it's in some sources it's named after me, so there you have it. I'm a thought leader. Oh, thank you. That was quite a warm reception for my triangle. Why did I end up doing this class? Well, I had to find something to do, and these are things that I've noticed, and a lot of you that are here that I've talked to for a long time, and lunch tables at Google and whatnot. Those of us that tried to run SRE hiring for a while, and even harder, tried to make SRE hiring more inclusive for a while, struggled with a few things that seemed really fundamental. The new 4-year computer science graduates, most of you, not that I can see, who's had an intern or a new college grad work for them? Well, tell me if this resonates at all. Most of them, in my experience, struggle with making a jump from kind of a class where a problem is written on a paper and is handed to them and is pretty much spoon-fed, to a problem that someone will actually pay you to solve instead of the other way around, which does not have those properties. Good, yes, this seems a little bit familiar. It's tough. They haven't learned a lot of the things that you're taking for granted as far as self-sufficiency, being able to find your own information, being able to cope with the fact that the information you can find is not perfect and sometimes is not even good. Now, this has gotten much worse in the last 2 years, by the way, as I've watched this class through the last 3 iterations. Generally, I'm caricaturing a little bit, but I think you'll let me get away with it if I say that new grads basically get minted out of, they get their diploma, and on that day, The thing that they are best able to do is take a new project and write new code on a green field with no dependencies. That's what they've been trained to do. Problem is, nobody gets that job. I'm not sure I've ever had that job, and I have access to a lot more jobs than my new grads do. The job they actually get in real life looks a lot more like, I copied this off of LinkedIn half an hour ago when I was looking for pictures. I don't even know what they were trying to say, but it seems to speak for itself. That is a more typical description of actual job that someone will pay you money to work on. Meanwhile, here's a thing that I've been in touch with some people in higher education kind of all along, a little bit off and on for these 25 years. So I had a little bit of awareness of how things were developing over there, and then when I was looking for something to do post-pandemic, that's how this class came to be. So the conditions I'm aware of, raise your hand if you have a connection to higher education ongoing kind of. All right, a few. You're welcome to fact check me on this or ask questions at the end or whatever, but what I observe, really I know Pomona College pretty well. Pomona College is part of the consortium of like 5 other whatever liberal arts colleges. So I know that, and I've been around Georgetown, Columbia, and Harvard teaching little snippets of things here and there. So I have a little bit of awareness. It's not, I'm not full-time professional at this or anything. But what I have noticed is happening in a lot of places is that as far as the liberal arts college's self-image, it has gotten radically distorted. At the college I taught at, the graduating class about 400 people, and CS is now the biggest major, 50 or so majors, and it would be much more than that, but they have started to limit people that can declare the major because they have 6 faculty to do this with, and for this college, that's a bad ratio. So they have 6-ish full-time tenure-track faculty to service 50 majors and several hundred students that would get a minor if they could. Well, I guess not per graduating year, but another good 100 or so would get a minor if they could. And this is in an environment where what the college is used to, what it thinks it does, the product it thinks it sells is like the German department has like 6 tenure-track faculty and 8 majors, maybe, something like that. That's kind of that's the way that they believe it's meant to work. CS has gotten way, way, way out of proportion to what the university is willing to support, finance, whatever. Another thing that has happened at the same time is this college, like many others, Pomona is mostly copying the Ivy Leagues that all did this 2014, 18 or so. A bunch of these institutions that have traditionally mostly served we'll just go ahead and call them among friends here, the trust fund baby set, the elites, the people with a lot of privilege, they wanted to intentionally make a change to that student body makeup, and they did. They had some success at shifting the demographics. The college that I teach at now looks a lot different from when I went there. And this is good. I'm all in favor. I wouldn't probably have an ongoing relationship with the college if that hadn't changed along the way. But it has exacerbated this situation, which is that when you bring in a lot of students who are first generation or groups of less privilege, what you're going to find, the empirical result, is that they want majors that they think will lead to a job. And all of the faculty senate meetings you can sit through where we talk about how they should be valuing like the broadening of the mind and the liberal arts tradition and blah, blah, blah will not change what the students want. So it is putting a lot of pressure on the institution. So that's the context. And so that leads to this kind of, they're not sure how to cope with it. Just as teaching is an experiment for me, the college letting me teach is an experiment for them. You have to get one of them to give a talk on how they think it's going. I don't know. I mean, I do have some inkling, and we'll talk about that at the end. But they are trying, what they're getting out of this is they are trying to find some way to thread the needle between, they do not want to see themselves as vocational training. That is like an insult to everything that they believe they stand for. But they also decided they don't want to exclusively serve trust fund babies, so what are you going to do about this? So a thing that they're trying is I have been called a professor of practice because I went there. This would have never happened if I didn't go to Pomona College, and have been given a classroom, and away we go. So I designed a class. I made this up completely out of whole cloth. I didn't have anything to base it on. I didn't know of anything that was similar that had been taught before. And of course, in finest of engineering traditions, I looked it up much later and found out that there have been a couple of things sort of like this that were done before, and used them as citations in the paper we eventually published. But I didn't know that when we started. And even the things that I found that were relevant prior classes were not that relevant. People tried things that were kind of software engineering based on C that had some of the same ideas that I had, but this was quite some time ago. 2001, 2002 is the last real thing that looks like it was someone was trying to accomplish the same goals. So I designed a class which is kind of two classes that run in parallel because this is the stuff I wanted to accomplish. There's the thing I call the practicum, which is that the students at the beginning of the semester are assigned to durable groups of 4 or 5. Durable means they're going to work with the same group through the semester, almost. At least I tell them that's what's going to happen at the beginning. And they're going to work with that group through a whole series of assignments which build one on the next, which I'll run you through that sequence in a second. The other half of that, so I have class twice a week. It's Monday and Wednesday. That's why I only got here this morning because I have a class in lab on Monday, which is hard for me to miss. I have a class right after this too, and one of my TAs is doing it, and good luck. This is not streamed, right? So they're not listening to me right now?
No, they'll watch the video later.
Oh, is it? Oh, wonderful. All right, guys, hope it's going great. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be outstanding. Today they're talking about the Columbia shuttle accident, which is, I know all these stories pretty well, but they're going to love it. So there's discussion classes on the Wednesdays where I have assigned a paper, and I got advice from people whose job it is to be a professor, so I assume they don't read the papers that I assign, which is an assumption which is held up well under scrutiny. And so I have one of the students present the content from the paper that they all ostensibly read before they have a discussion on it, because I want to get to the discussion, and it doesn't work if half the students haven't read the paper, but perhaps you've belonged to a book club, so you know how that goes. And so what I give them for reading, I've got another slide on this actually, so I'm going to come back to that. But reading is basically disasters and then some academic stuff. Here's a little bit about, I told you a little bit already about where I'm teaching. It's called Pomona College. It's in Claremont. It's in Southern California, LA County. Liberal arts college what's that? Oh, maybe I wasn't meant to hear, sorry, okay. So anyway, there I am. It's, that's proof that I actually do this for some reason. The college used this picture in some promotional thing that they did. And I didn't pick out my green hoodie on purpose. I only realized later how very accurately I was recreating the Professor Horseman sequence, if you are familiar. We're just not going to dig into that today either, though. Here's the sequence of assignments that I give them for their practicum groups. So they've been assigned a group of 4 or 5 people. I have done some pre-work. I make them fill out a questionnaire about where I ask them for what their level of comfort is with a handful of things, so that I try to avoid the outcome where I construct a group where there are 0 people who have ever seen anything about a database before, for example. But that's really hit or miss, because if you ask the students to evaluate how much they understand subject X, like, you're evaluating something, but it's not how much they understand subject X. So I do the best I can, but I assign them to these groups, and I really try to keep them the same. Every time there's 2 or 3 weeks at the beginning where I've got a bunch of students up in the office, and they don't barely know me yet, so they're not comfortable talking to me either. And they've got this interpersonal problem or that interpersonal problem, and obviously you got to watch that very closely, because there's a category of those which is good and is a learning experience, and there's a category of those which is not and will not be a good learning experience and can go worse than that. But that is no different from managing a couple of teams. So many of you are familiar with how to do that. If I didn't have that experience, it would be difficult and risky to run a class with this structure. It is still difficult and risky to run a class with this structure, but it hasn't been a disaster yet. So if I quit soon, it will never be a disaster. Here's the sequence of things that I assign them to do. This is approximately 1 week each, although I have some elasticity, so I push deadlines out or pull them back. I can never pull them in. That never works. But I can push them out all day long. They will never fight you on that. So like, there's some elasticity in the schedule, but it's approximately once a week to do each of these things. First, your first week, all you got to do is find your group, set up an AWS account, get a VM on EC2, get your free tier going on, get some SSH keys, set it up so everybody can log in. There you go, you're done, week 1. Next week, I'm going to make you install Postgres, import some starter data that I've given you in the form of a CSV file. I could make it easier than that, but I don't. I put it in a CSV file. Then you have to answer some questions about that you can answer from the data, which are just to prove that you can run a SQL command and get an answer. That is week 2. My numbers are confusing. Week number 2, which is the 3rd week in my sequence, I make you install Tomcat, Python, and the web app. I forgot to put a slide explaining this because I forget. I don't really care, but like what I build the whole thing around is I have this hobby project that I started in 2000, like the year of our Lord 2000, when I was just graduating, and it was also a bad tech economy and didn't have a job. And like I wrote this whole thing. Java servlets were the hot thing at the time, and like JSP. And I wrote this whole thing that was like, I'm going to make what's effectively now well known as Flickr or like Google Photos or something. I just made my own, and I still operate it now. I've used it for 20-something years. And it has outlived Flickr, in fact, and it is for some definitions of outlive. And so it was just a handy thing that I had sitting on the shelf that has the properties I wanted to have, which is nothing is documented. There's sloppy, inconsistent notes, which were written by many different programmers over the last 20 years, where the many different programmers are all Mikey at different points in time, using different programming languages and different whatever thing I wanted to do at the time. So like I have a Python backend process, I have this, that, and the other thing. It's just a big mess because it's been worked on for 20 years. So it's just what I want for this class. So I have a branch of it that has a bunch of unfixed bugs that I have frozen in time, and I start the class from that point each time. So they have a web app. They got to install all that stuff. They got to install Tomcat, Python, blah, blah, blah. All they have to do here in week 2 is show that that stuff is installed and working, as in if it serves a 500, the Apache Tomcat default like 500 internal server error, I'm like, great, you're done for this week. This is hard enough for them, like, by the way. But this is much harder. This is now legend that has been passed down. Like the students tell this, the students ask the upper class people for advice on what classes to take and whatnot, and their advisors learn and so on. So like this is one of the most durable legends of the class is that what they think is the 3rd week is actually the 4th week, because I've split it up and spread it out some, is like just the hardest thing you will ever do. There is no requirements for this assignment except that all that stuff you just installed, you just got to make it actually connect. Like Tomcat has to speak to the database has to be able to the web app has to work right. You have to have file system permissions in the right place in order for you to upload and download files. That stuff is very hard for them. They hate this week. I'll prove it. I've got evidence. I'll show you in a minute. Week 4, I want them to set up some APM-style instrumentation. This is not 100% true. I've had a few groups pick Honeycomb. I just give them an assignment, which is you have to investigate these 4 or 5 products. Yep, Liz is here for Honeycomb. I don't tell them which one. I tell them they have to make these decisions themselves. But I tell them, do you need something that has the following properties? Here's a list of products to investigate. Pick one and install it. They mostly pick New Relic because it's free. And Honeycomb has a free tier too, but they mostly pick New Relic. Then week 5, they have to make an on-call rotation. This is the other thing that the class is like legendary for. They don't like this. I just went through this 10 days ago or so because our spring break was last week. Unfortunately, that's why I'm missing class right now. And I had at least 8 students be like, I know we're supposed to be on call and all, but like not during spring break, right? And I was like, what kind of question is that? Obviously during spring break too. Like I told you had to have 90% availability. That's what you're being graded on now. So as fast as I can, like I run through, I have to scaffold, as they call it, a bunch of this early stuff. Like I have to give them pretty detailed requirements, even though I don't want to. Like my first attempt was, the assignments were much more vague. It was like install Postgres and get it working. No, you can't do that. Like the assignment sheets have gotten longer with a lot of detailed criteria of like working means A, B, C, D, E. So I have to handhold them through a lot of the setup stuff because it is so wildly unfamiliar to them. Very few of them have ever seen, like sudo is new to them. The package manager is something they've never seen before. And here's what, you know this, and it's hard to see from the perspective of someone like me or you who's been doing this forever, but if you know absolutely nothing and go search how do I install Postgres, the answer you actually want is not going to even be in the first 10 Google search results. It is full of trash. There is all kinds, like they find things that I would have never known. But you'll get, so I'll get one group trying to install Postgres using like directions for like some version of Linux I've never heard of, using like Flatpak or something like that. And they're on Amazon Linux too, and none of the commands work. It doesn't work at all. They will very often find the instructions on the Postgres on the project's own web page, which is at least a reasonable place to look, but almost always a project like that is going to tell you that the way to install it is to download the source distribution, so they start doing that. Yep. And so their machines, by the time, at this point in the semester, week 3, 4, their machines are an unholy mess. But if they have soldiered through, then like they may be able to actually serve a working, they may get to the point where they actually have a working web app. Then as fast as I can, I get to the point where I make the assignments much simpler and tell them, great, you set up all this stuff, I dragged you kicking and screaming through this whole sequence. Now, I'm never going to look at your machine again. This is not 100% true because they still have to get help fixing things. But like, I'm never going to log into your machine again. I don't care what you are doing, whether you're using cron jobs or whether you're using monitoring or whether you're using PagerDuty. I'm not going to be checking up on any of that. I do one thing and one thing only, which is I run synthetic load to your machine through like a test sequence, and I monitor whether it works or not. And that's it. So like they get to week 6 or 7 and their assignment sheet is nothing but your availability number will be graded according to this scale. Then, I'll tell you how the results go in a second, but I'll tell you the rest of the sequence. Then we still got a few weeks of the semester left to go, so I try to walk them farther up that hierarchy of the things that I thought leadered about all those years ago. And like the next thing I make them do is learn to write a postmortem. Which they think is the funniest thing ever, because they come back from their internships like a year later and they're like, I had an outage and I had to write a postmortem. And I was like, yes, that happens. Very good. Like, I'm glad you got to see one first when the stakes were low and didn't matter. I tell them this every day. It extremely doesn't work. Like, you cannot tell undergraduates that like their grade in my class does not matter. They will not hear you. But I know that the stakes here don't matter. So I give them stuff that is meant to be stressful, where failing here has very low consequences. As far as I can tell, that's the point of teaching anybody anything. But anyway, so like I give them a week. This is the other thing that the class is famous for, and they get fixated on this, and they believe that I am breaking their site on purpose all the way through. Like, and like they 100%. You guys watching the video, I'm telling the truth. They 100% believe through weeks 1, 2, and 3. Like they set up something yesterday and it's just gone. Like it just stops working, and they're like, "You did?" I'm like, "The hell I did!" Like I have no idea why your thing didn't work. I help you figure it out if you want, but like I didn't touch it. But there is a week when I give them synthetic problems, so they have something a little bit more interesting to write a postmortem about. So I have a bunch of scenarios that, again, they think are wildly contrived and unrealistic that would never happen in real life, such as a disk fills up and the machine goes down. That's always a crowd pleaser. Memory leak in the Java web app, which I didn't even put there on purpose. It just was there. Like honestly, it was just accidental. But like, sure, now you got to debug that too. So that's why I don't update the branch. I keep them. I start each place, and each year I start in the same place, so I know what some of the bugs are going to be anyway. So I give them some made-up outages, which depending on my mood and which group I'm talking about and how I feel about their attitude, I might do it like middle of the day or middle of the night or on a weekend or whatever. So like, but I talk up how scary and threatening that's going to be way more than I actually do. Like I set their expectations so they're more nervous about it than they need to be. Which well, no one's going to watch this video who didn't already take the class. So like I'm giving away a bunch of the stuff behind the curtain. Then I make them do, they like this one too. They're at this point used to this little fake synthetic. I run a whole little apparatus. It runs JMeter test scripts. It just gives them synthetic transactions that it plays over and over and over. And I run it at a pretty low level because I just use some cheapo like spot request VMs to do it, and I don't have very much resources for it. Because I got to pay for all this myself. I don't know who else is going to pay for it. And but on this one particular week, I deploy this whole thing. I got this cloud. I don't know. I found somebody's template that lets me push a button and launch like 200 copies of the load tester instead of like one. And then I give them 15,000 RPM and show them what happens. Because like with the corny little broken ass machine that they've built up to this point, like if you send it 10,000 RPM, there's no hope. Like it dies. RPM is what New Relic calls it. I just mean requests per minute in case that's not standard. So they like that. We have a whole little graphic with like the Death Star, and we tell them when the space laser is going to come. This doesn't happen by surprise. They get told that like in next week's lab period, we're going to run through these one by one, and everybody's going to get to watch while you get your 15 minutes of the space laser, and like we'll see what happens. So, and I have to give them a lot of hand-holding on this too. I don't expect if I just told them figure out how to make this go to 10,000 RPM that they could do that. I have to tell them about like RDS and about like duplicating their serving web app in a way that it will distribute the requests and blah, blah, blah. And then time permitting, there's a couple of stuff at the end which is kind of not critical that I do if there's weeks left in the semester, which is I do some CI/CD stuff. I make them deploy some changes so they get some kind of a rudimentary clue of change management. And then maybe I do Docker if we're going for extra credit. This I won't spend a lot of time on, but it's a diagram I use in class a lot. All of the gray boxes are just the software processes that they set up on their one little like T2 Nano or whatever it is. Like that's all encapsulated in that one little VM that they run. Then I make them build out all of that stuff in yellow. They control that, and I talk a bunch of words about how this is like a human-machine hybrid system and the emergent behaviors of human-machine hybrid systems and cybernetics and blah, blah, blah. But all of that they control. Like once I have verified that they've set it up, that is all entirely under their control. I don't check on that again either. I want them to have to learn to operate the social system. That's a lot of what it is. So like the exercise that they just had to do of figuring out how to get through spring break while having somebody on call all the time. Conveniently, there's this memory leak, which means that there's definitely going to need to be somebody do something to keep the site working at all. And whether they actually get to the end of the week with 90% availability, I don't care a ton. Again, I'm not the one getting a grade on it, so whatever. But I do let them think that I care because the learning experience here is having to sit with these other three people that maybe you like and maybe don't, and be like, who's going to do Saturday and Sunday? And nobody wants to do Saturday and Sunday, and this person's going on spring break to Mexico, and this person's going to blah, 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 but like, someone's got to do it. This is kind of a overall philosophy of how I design the class. I told you this along the way, is as much as possible I don't give step-by-step instructions. I give outcome-oriented goals of like, you need to have this thing work and it needs to work in the following way, but I don't tell them how to do it. I want them to, as much as possible, learn those things on their own. I have to steer them back a lot of the time, and this, again, is getting harder. By steer them back, I mean I see them doing something that I know is going to lead to misery, like doing, source installations of pip packages on the as root on their VM, and be like, let's hold on, like let me show you this other wiki over here, which has some other instructions that you might like better. I give them the planned surprises. This is the thing that I saw. I did find some prior work published. This paper from 2000 called like 20 Dirty Tricks was about teaching software engineering. And it had a lot of ideas for what to put into your software engineering course, which are similar. Their ideas were things like, make sure to change the requirements at like week 6 out of 8 on the software project and stuff of that nature. Here, for instance, this is I've used that game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes with like the VR goggles. Yeah, okay, yes, I like it too. I've used that before with some success. This year I tried something different. I made up this kind of RPG tabletop exercise because we're using it in our commercial workshops, which has defined jobs for 10 to 15 people. You have to have some elasticity because you never know who's going to show up, especially in the commercial workshop. But it has defined jobs for 10 to 15 people, and it's like the type of, you've all played this kind of game. It's like a hidden, each character has unique information that only they have, and then they have unique goals that are not shared with the rest of the group. And it's set up to look exactly like government situations I've worked in. So you have like the governor's chief of staff, whose goals are radically unlike the goals of the plant operator, but who has a lot of power to affect their outcomes. So I give them a little scenario like this. What you're seeing here, the picture's all blurry, so no one should be recognizable. The reason the pictures are all blurry is because this is during the simulation 2 nights ago or whatever. They had brought the reactor power down so low that we were under so-called emergency power, so the lights are out. So they have to work by their cell phone flashlights. That's what they're doing. There's always unplanned surprises, which is mostly challenging for the instructor. But this is really rough. Which one are you laughing at?
RMSRF.
Oh yeah. No, they did that. That one, that was great. Like I was super happy when they did that. So in order, the thing that makes this tiring is all of these SaaS everything. So their monitoring product, their pager duty, all of these things. And I know a lot of you are here, so I'm talking to you. Like what you can do with the free tier is endlessly mutating. And like 1 year I run it and you get like 14 free days of tier X, and next year it's 21 free days, but the tiers have all been renamed different things, and like it makes it hard. I have to redo all this research myself every time if I want to kind of guide them to something that's going to work for purposes of the class. So the mutation in the tools that they use is, to them it doesn't matter because they only do the class once. To the instructor it creates a lot of load. They do things that are totally valid learning experiences, like students really will find ways to do the moral equivalent of RM-RF/. Honestly, the first year this happened, it was such a positive experience that I thought about trying to find ways to force it to happen in future years, because I did not set them up to do this. They found their own way to do it. And then they came to me and they're like, we think we ran, we think we deleted the file system. How do I get it back? And I was like, get it back? Like, you don't, my friend. That is not a thing. What you do now is you terminate this instance, start a new instance, get out your notes that you were told to keep from step 0 and build a whole new one. And that time it went pretty well because they found there's been 3 or 4 times that a group has backed themselves into this corner where they have nothing that they can do because they didn't have any backups, they didn't have anything, they have to start over from scratch. Again, there's no consequences to this here. It's not like, doing this at your job. It might be worse, but like it is more work for them, and they're terrified and they think that the sky is falling and it's the worst thing that's ever happened. But like, most of them find that if they start over from the beginning and rerun the sequence, it is so much easier. That is a good confidence building outcome for them. That does not happen every time, I have learned. So I don't try to engineer this. I don't force them to restart at any point. I've thought about trying to do it, but like the results on that are mixed, honestly. Sometimes it's good, sometimes less good. Yeah, in year 2, the one that had to be blown away and start over was some kind of unholy mess of they had run pip in 4 or 5 different ways, mostly as root. And so there were many different package managers that thought they were in charge of the same files, and that's going to be a familiar problem to you guys here. The answer is don't do that, and the answer is bury this machine in salt the earth and never look at it again. That can't be fixed. Meanwhile, so in parallel with that practicum sequence, which I've been talking about, I make them do some readings and discussions. My goals for that are try to encourage them to do what I vaguely think of as systems thinking. This is kind of poorly defined, but I try to get them to think about things in the way that makes sense to me. Build some resilience again. A lot of the surprises, a lot of the challenging, a lot of the things that they're set up where they're expected to fail are meant to build just kind of EQ and resilience. And a little bit of, this is just my own personal agenda more or less, but the students really care about this a lot too. They'll bring this up on their own anyway. They think about things like what is the role that technology is playing in the world right now and what are they going to do. They care about all the stuff which are the hot button issues. Like right now it's what's happening with AI and so on. So there's a component of the reading that I kind of scale up or scale back depending on how interested a particular class is, which is kind of what does it all mean. And I try to follow the people that take this seriously and have tried to figure out how to teach thinking about any of this type of like ethics. What does that even mean in our industry? Like people that try to teach this kind of thing more or less agree that doing it prescriptively is hopeless. So like putting a list of bullet points on the slide and saying like these are the principles you should think about for whether your project is a good project or bad project, I haven't even tried it. I'm willing to take their word for it when people say it doesn't work. You just give them stories and have them think about them on their own. And I don't, occasionally, as my students will attest, they get better as the semester goes on at baiting me with things that are definitely going to get me yelling about whatever topic of the day. So like I have my own opinions and they don't stay out of the class altogether. But for the most part, I let them decide for themselves. They confront, because of some stuff I make them read, they crash head first very early in like the second week into a discussion where I make them like look at a question of here are the different people. I forget how it gets framed exactly, but it's like here's a situation where there are different people that play different roles on this project. It's like Fred Brooks talks about like design, and you got to translate all the words 30 years into the future, but like Fred Brooks talks a lot about like the role of design and programmers and blah, blah, blah. And like I'm like, here, when this actually becomes real life, when this is a real problem, somebody, possibly you, is going to decide whether to pay this person more than this other person. What do you want to base that decision on? Like, literally, if you have the pile of money and you're deciding how to split it up, how are you going to do it? And there is no answer that doesn't come with consequences that somebody doesn't like. Like, that's just how that works. I've had that job a bunch of times, and that is just how that works. So I force them to confront some things like that don't have answers, because like that is, as far as I know, the best you can do to help them at least be prepared to think about that when it is their turn. I do a lot, and then as far as like theory stuff, so I give them a bunch of these stories is what works, and that I know that because the theoretical underpinning I found for any of this that fits the best is this sense-making stuff That word means a lot of things to different people. If I say sense-making in the like sociology Carl Weick sense, does that ring any bells with anybody? Maybe a little bit. Okay, good for you. I actually spend when I talk at all these days to the very much smaller groups that I talk to, it's mostly about the sense-making stuff. Thanks. That plus the system safety framework, which I'll bet more of you have heard of, which is some work that's mostly led by Nancy Leveson out of MIT. I give them some papers on that. It is impossible to get them to read them. They're dense and they're slow and they're like full of like jargon. What they will read is a magazine article on Air France 447. So like I give them more of that kind of stuff and it works better. Here's some reactions. Here's some of what's known about how the class goes. I'm in the middle of the third iteration right now. There were 17 students that signed up in 2021. They were a distinctly different group. They were the kind of risk takers and weirdos of the department. That's how it works when you are doing something for the first time, and when you're a weird professor, which I am. There were 33 in the second year. There's 31 in the class that I have right now. Of those, an approximate count is 24 of them were women, 19 are from underrepresented groups. 3 people dropped, and I'm only counting as a drop someone that got more than a couple weeks into the class and dropped closer to the drop date. Like if you never showed up to class at all, I don't count you as a drop. I never even met you. 2 people withdrew, got an incomplete for one reason or another. The grades, I have no need to fight the war on grade inflation. It is what it is. So I just stay in line with the rest of the department. Everybody gets a B+ or an A-, and we call it a day. And then here's some of the comments that get on the open forum writing. There's been a bunch of people who said it was their best class ever or favorite class ever. That's been said 11 times by my count. And this is only from the first 2 because I don't have the feedback from the third group yet. That feels good. I like to hear that. It does not make me as popular with the rest of the department as you might think. 6 people said it increased their problem-solving confidence. 5 of these were women. This will not be a shock to many of you here, but the women, which are, as you can see, a little bit underrepresented in the group to begin with, considering that they're drawing on a population in this college where the CS student body overall is very close to 50-50, women and men. So they're a little underrepresented in my class still. It has gotten better in the later years. It was very bad in the early years. Like I said, the composition of my first year was different. The ones that are most likely, there's a clear trend that the ones that are most likely to talk about this being a useful confidence-building exercise are the women in the class. I do get negative comments. They're mostly about how everything is too much work and too hard. Then I always get comments that are like, I didn't want to spend so much time on topic X, and I wanted to spend more time on topic Y. But those don't add up to any clear trend. Like, for everything that somebody says, someone else will say the opposite. I told you I have some evidence of how they feel. I make them do feelings. I get them to chart, and you have to pick some feelings words for how you're doing. At step 3, which is when I told you the thing that is so hard, the sky is falling, I hate it, I have to make this computer work, I don't know how. I'll read them in case you can't see it. These are the words I got. Disappointed, content, disheartened, despair, depressed, restless, annoyed, drained, tense, frustrated, blessed, miserable, stressed, sleepy, sad, furious, and hopeful, question mark. I told them, this is the 3rd time I'm doing it, so I know what to expect. So I told them that you feel bad now, and you're going to feel better in 2 or 3 weeks when you see that you made the 90% number that right now you think is impossible. So I did the same exercise 2 or 3 weeks later, and these are the words that I got back. It's, could be more clear of a result, but it's a result. Complacent, grateful, secure, mellow, peaceful, at ease, sleepy, pleasant, chill, uneasy, tired, apprehensive, ecstatic, what's going on there, and worried. I didn't try to make a scatter plot or anything, but it makes my point. They're willing to buy it in class when I show them the before and after it. I'm like, you learned how to make the machine work, and your peace of mind went up. That's the point. You don't really care about this, but just so you know, this is what the collection I do looks like. That they get to pick their own team names, which are HTML colors. So there you go. Each day I summarize like how much the last day it was available, and I make this table in a place where they can get to it. There's a bunch of behind the scenes work for the instructor. Like I said, it's hard to keep up with AWS and stuff. It's hard to troubleshoot the behavior. I have just realized that my countdown clock was to the end of the session, so if I don't stop approximately now, I'm not leaving any time for questions, so let's just kind of blow through it. Here's the last slide. What's going to happen next? Hard to say, honestly. Like, I've made the materials available through I published this paper at the SIG CSE conference with a co-author. A couple of people have asked for them. There's very few instructors hanging around in academic jobs that can do this, honestly, is the thing that we found. Because the demands are so high, you have to debug stuff that you were never going to find on your own. Like, the students will find broken shit that like you didn't even know was possible. It's good learning, but like you have to start from a pretty high, you have to be pretty comfortable with this stuff to begin. You don't find those instructors hanging around in colleges. And then the institutions put up their own roadblocks. So if you were reading this right now and thinking you would like to do something like this, that's great. Your best shot, unless you already have a master's or a PhD degree, in which case you have more options. But if you don't have that, your best shot is to go to the place that you went to college, because they are frequently willing to make an exception there for reasons of PR and alumni development and so forth. Could adapt this maybe for corporate government settings. I don't know. That's it. That's my talk. Thank you. Questions?